by 2017, we were at really at the peak of the bear market in precious metals, and this was when Bitcoin was taking off. And there were a lot of people selling their gold, and talks of central banks divesting of gold and investing in treasuries or income-producing assets. And then out of nowhere, a story popped up that the Bundesbank had been trying to repatriate their gold for a few years.
Andy Schectman is not just the president and co-founder of Miles Franklin, a leading precious metals dealer. He is also a fearless whistleblower and a visionary thinker who has exposed the dark secrets of central banks. He has appeared on numerous media outlets, such as CNBC, Bloomberg, Fox Business, and RT, to share his insights and warnings with the world. Andy has exposed some shocking truths that central banks don't want you to know. Andy knows how central banks are manipulating the global financial system to enrich themselves and to the detriment of billions of people. Andy knows how central banks are suppressing the price of precious metals, creating massive inflation and debt, colluding with governments and corporations, and preparing for a global reset that will wipe out your savings and wealth. In this video, we will explore what, in Andy's opinion, central banks are hiding from you and why it matters. Stay tuned.
Now I get it.
So, Andy Schectman has uncovered the sinister plot of how the central banks manipulate the price of gold and silver. He reveals the hidden motives and methods of the central banks and why they are putting the wealth and future of the people at risk. So, according to Andy Schectman, central banks are manipulating the price of gold and silver to suppress their value and discourage people from buying them.
What awoke in me was, I guess, as we talked about at the onset, was what happened in 2017 with the German Bundesbank making a strong push publicly to repatriate their gold from the New York Fed. Shortly thereafter, we saw other banks like the Dutch National Bank, the Bank of Poland, Hungary, Turkey, Austria, the Czech National Bank, all of these banks doing the same thing, repatriating their gold in a period of time when no one was buying it. The following year, those same banks in 2018 bought more gold as a group than they did in the previous 60 years combined. And
Andy revealed that central banks are doing this because they want to maintain the illusion of confidence in the US dollar and the fiat currency system, which are losing their purchasing power due to inflation and debt.
It started with getting the gold back in their possession, then accumulating it, and then we reclassified it as the only other tier 1 reserve asset in the world, next to US dollars and US treasuries, and or a high liquid asset that is riskless, according to central banks. Whatever definition or name you want to call it, that's the way the central banks look at it, as a riskless asset.
Also, central banks want to accumulate gold and silver for themselves at low prices as they prepare for a global reset that will devalue fiat currencies and favor hard assets. So, Schectman claims that central banks use various methods to manipulate the price of gold and silver, such as selling large amounts of paper contracts on the futures market, which create artificial supply and drive down the spot price, and also coordinating with bullion banks and other institutions to create short positions and naked shorts, which create downward pressure on the price. You will be shocked to know that this act is the least among the things the central banks don't want you to see. Stay tuned to discover more. Hold on. Before we continue, this channel creates content on things companies don't want you to see, technology, videos inspired by the stock and crypto market, and expert ideas of the global economy. So, if technology and the stock market are something you are excited about, kindly subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications.
Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.
Andy Schectman has exposed the terrifying reality of what central banks are doing to the value of fiat currencies. Andy reveals the horrifying truth about central banks and uncontrolled money printing, which is dangerous to the fiat currency. So, Andy exposes how central banks are creating money out of thin air by expanding their balance sheets and buying massive amounts of government bonds and other assets through quantitative easing programs. He explains how this floods the financial system with new money and increases the money supply. He warns that this leads to inflation and debt disasters, such as skyrocketing consumer prices and plummeting purchasing power, which destroys people's living standards and sparks social chaos. Surging asset prices and sinking yields create bubbles and distortions in the markets and increase wealth inequality. And lastly, soaring interest rates and debt servicing costs increase the risk of default and insolvency for governments, businesses, and households. But why are central banks doing these? Andy Schectman reveals that central banks are doing these to stimulate the economy and support government spending, which has already caused unprecedented fiscal deficits and public debt levels. Also, they want to avoid deflation and negative interest rates, which could trigger a debt deflation spiral and a banking crisis. Lastly, Andy thinks some central banks do that because they want to devalue their currencies and boost their exports, and as a person with years of experience in finance, I can testify that this is what Japan and China are doing. Not only are central banks printing money out of thin air, but they are also collaborating with corporations to manipulate the financial system.
How long will it last?
Schectman warns that central banks are betraying the people's trust and welfare by colluding with governments and corporations. And not only is this unethical, but he predicts that this collaboration leads to corruption and cronyism. So, Schectman revealed that central banks are colluding with governments and corporations by various means, such as coordinating their fiscal and monetary policies, which create massive stimulus and bailouts for the government and corporate sectors. Influencing the media and public opinion, which creates propaganda and misinformation about the state of the economy and the financial system. And above all, controlling the markets and the prices create manipulation and distortion of the supply and demand forces. But why? Let me explain. Central banks do this to maintain their power and influence over the economy and society, which depend on their monetary policies and regulations. And also to benefit from the asset purchases, which enrich them at the expense of the people they are to serve. Not only is Schectman more worried about the problems the central banks are causing the global economy, but also, David Hunter thinks that the U.S. debt problem is bigger than everyone thinks. Check out our recent video on that to discover more.
Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.